and welcome into the Change Up on WOAY Sports, a new video podcast. I'm joined by Matt Digby, our sports director here at WOAY, and also Tom Beal on our sports team. Welcome, guys. Welcome into our first show.
Yeah, it's we've been doing a lot of planning, a lot of hard work, and it's great that today is finally day one.
Excited?
Excited, man. The Change Up, episode 1. Big things coming here, West Virginia sports and beyond. I'm excited.
Yeah, make sure you check us out on all the social media platforms. We're at Sports WOAY. That's on Twitter and Facebook. We'll also have a YouTube channel up, and you can also just watch us online as much as possible and give us a shout out to your friends. Make sure you share our podcast. This is our initial podcast, so we want to welcome you guys in and thank you for joining us. You know, Southern West Virginia guys, you know, a big WVU Marshall sports area. You know, even though we're in the southern part of the state, you know, these guys travel up to Morgantown, they go up to Huntington, and they enjoy their college sports. You guys excited about the season coming up?
I really am. I'll talk about it a little bit more in a couple of minutes, but college football, that's where it all begins for me. That's the one sport I love to watch more than any other, and I love to watch as many sports as I can, but if I absolutely had to pick one, it'd be college football, hands down.
And Tom, we got Dale Wolfley coming up later in the show, WVU Varsity Club. He does all the pregame, halftime, post-game shows for IMG. You know, really getting into this Mountaineer season.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to talking to Dale. It's kind of my first experience with WVU football. I just moved down here to Beckley a couple months ago, so I'm excited to get into that first season and really talk to Dale, get to learn a lot more about this upcoming team.
And Tom's from Boston, as he kind of alluded to there a little bit. So.
Yes, sir. I went from Groton, Massachusetts, a little bit outside of Boston, and I went to school at Marist College up in New York, graduated with a degree in sports communication. And now I'm the weekend sports anchor here, and this is cool because it's an opportunity for us to open up and show you guys a little bit of a different side of ourselves. If you watch the newscast, we give you kind of the straightforward, this is what's going on in sports in the area. And this is really our opportunity to show you guys a little more about what we know about sports, our opinions about sports, and kind of breaking things down at a more detailed level.
And Matt's from Ohio. Matt, you know, when we talked about this, when we were planning this, the one thing we wanted to do is make sure we got our opinions out there. You know, we talk amongst ourselves every day, all day about sports, and then we kind of thought, hey, let's let the fans get on this, right?
Absolutely, yeah. My journey, I born and raised in Columbus, Ohio, huge college football fan, huge sports fan in general. I actually did not go to Ohio State, rather I went down US 33 to Ohio University, so I was introduced to the Bobcats tradition and their big rivalry with Marshall, for example. Had a lot of great matchups when I was a student there in the football and men's basketball between the Bobcats and the Thundering Herd.
Yeah, the Marshall fans just shut this thing off.
But after that, I did a lot of freelance work, doing a lot of play-by-play for soccer, for basketball, for college softball, a lot of small colleges. WVU Tech, for example, one of my first experiences, I was able to call a soccer national championship hosted by WVU Tech, and the Golden Bear men would go on to win that tournament. So it was a lot of fun getting to see the passion that fans have for their school at all level. And then I joined here at WOAY in January 2015, right in the middle of Big Atlantic Classic Week 2015. So that was a great introduction to sports here in Southern West Virginia.
Of course, I regularly do the news here for WOAY, also news director, but I am from Fayetteville, West Virginia, went to WVU, so you know, my allegiance is sometimes very Mountaineer.
Someone's got to have the Mountaineer roots on this
Absolutely.
podcast.
There you go. But I did go to Marshall my freshman year, so that counts for something. It's a good school.
It is, yeah. It's a great school and great athletic tradition with the Thundering Herd, like I mentioned. Yeah, I always love getting to see Ohio and Marshall play each other, whatever sport, because you know they're going to bring it 100%.
Yeah, and just moving down here, I think you've already seen the collective pot down here in Southern West Virginia. You have that Marshall alumni that goes forth, and then the WVU is just strong as always.
Passion, man.
Yeah.
There's passion all over the state for the sports. I see, it seems like every car has a WVU or a Marshall sticker right on the back of it. And these people, they wear it on their sleeves.
Yeah.
They live, breathe, and die Mountaineer football, Thundering Herd football, and basketball, and a lot of these other great sports that we have.
I think the best is a house divided. You see in those license plates, a house divided. You have Marshall on one side, WVU.
I've seen a few of those.
Yeah. And also we cover Virginia Tech football coming up this year. Hokies ready for a new era down in Blacksburg. Justin Fuente and his head coach, after longtime coach Frank Beamer decided to retire, but he was able to go out with a winning record, with a bowl win, continue the Hokies bowl streak. But the Hokies are going to be looking forward to a good season, particularly a good showing in week 2 of the season for them, because they get to travel down to Bristol Motor Speedway to take on Tennessee. In all likelihood, they're going to be a top 10 team when they play the Volunteers.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun game. You know, growing up in my time, the Hokies were our bitter, bitter enemy. A lot of people say Pitt, but man, I can remember Michael Vick, Marcus Vick. Those guys were not welcomed in Morgantown by far.
Sure
Fun
not.
fact, my high school band actually was, my high school band growing up in Ohio, they were able to take a trip to the Gator Bowl the year that Marcus Vick stepped on Elvis Dummerville in the Virginia Tech-Louisville game. So that's one of the lasting memories of Virginia Tech.
Yeah, if you guys can't tell, we're excited for football season. I'm sure you are too. We're kind of in that middle part of July where it's just baseball and not a whole lot else, but we got football just around the corner. It's just a few more weeks and we can really start getting into training camps. What else we got
51
going on
days.
today, David?
Well, yeah, that's enough about us, I guess. You know, last night, big night, ESPYs. Like you said, it's kind of the dog days of summer, so we're kind of entertainment of the sports now. You got the ESPY winners last night. Matt, you're the Ohio guy. I think last night was the crowning of the trophy for Cleveland in general. You saw LeBron get best male athlete. Best team was the Cleveland Cavaliers.
Tyronn Lue won best coach, man. Can you believe that?
He did.
He was on the helm for all of 4 months. Won best coach. That's crazy.
Especially after you go back and all the criticism he faced in the season, the regular season, with Blatt stepping down, Tyronn taking over. Do you agree? Best team, best athlete?
I'm not sure, because I think a lot of other teams did very well. Denver Broncos, for example, as a team, they did win the Super Bowl. As flawed as they were, Alabama, I think, also would have a very strong case. The struggle they went through after losing early in the season at home to Ole Miss, but then rallying to make a statement win in the semifinals against Michigan State. But I mean, you take a look at how the NBA Finals unfolded. I mean, how many times have we seen a team come back from 3 games to 1 down? That's never happened in the finals. And the Cavaliers, they were able to get the job done when it mattered the most.
Best athlete, LeBron. Was he the best athlete?
He won the award, and he may, from a physical standpoint, he might be one of the most freakish athletes that we've ever seen. But when you're talking about this past year, who accomplished the most as a male athlete, for me, that conversation starts and ends with Steph Curry. I mean, you saw the numbers, over 30 points a game, 5 rebounds, 6 assists, back-to-back MVPs this year. Took the Warriors to 73 regular season wins within 4.5 poor shooting minutes in the finals, and that Game 7 probably goes differently. Draymond Green doesn't get suspended in Game 5. That probably goes differently. But he's just done so much. The 50-45-90 club, 50% from the field, 45% from 3, 90% from the line. That's very, very rare. The only other guy that's ever done that is Steve Nash, and he hit less than half of the three-pointers Steph Curry hit this year. What we've seen this guy do as far as revolutionize the game of basketball from a shooting standpoint, it's unbelievable. He has 4 seasons of over 250 three-pointers. He breaks his record almost every single year. He broke it by more than 100 this year, went over 400 threes on the season, and he shoots them from everywhere. They're not just right on the line. He's shooting them from 35 feet, from half court at the buzzer, and he makes them. You expect him to make him. And he's completely revolutionized the game. People show up an hour and a half beforehand just to watch this guy dribble.
Best record-breaking performance is what Steph won last night. Can you take Steph and put him on the Cavs? Does he have the same performance?
I think he does, because he has that great supporting cast at the Warriors that he would have with the Cavs if he were to come to Cleveland. Because you don't just have Steph Curry. You have Klay Thompson. You had Andrew Bogut. You had Harrison Barnes, who were also very solid. You had Draymond Green. If he wasn't suspended for Game 5, how does that turn out? Especially because Game 5 was in Oakland that night back in June. So I think you are a product of the environment around you, and Steph Curry's definitely taken advantage of that. It helped him well at Davidson when he was in college, and it's helped him well with Golden State.
Certainly. I mean, this is a guy who, he goes to a different team. They probably don't just go win 73 games. Whereas, like LeBron, he goes and changes teams, and that team pretty much right away becomes one of the top teams in the conference that they're playing in. But what Steph's done from a shooting standpoint, nobody else can do that. I mean, so it changes a little bit when you got a guy like Klay Thompson that teams also have to respect. A guy as versatile as Draymond Green, who you have to respect. But we've never seen anybody shoot like this, and that's why for me, he's the best male athlete this year.
So best team went to the Cavs. You mentioned the Broncos. Do you think the best team was the Broncos this year?
I think the best team was the Broncos, just for other reasons, because of also the sentimental aspect. I know Cleveland has been a sentimental favorite because of the long drought for all of their sports teams, but the Broncos, is this going to be Peyton Manning's last year? They've come close so many times. They came close in Super Bowl 48, and then they were just shut down from the very first snap against the Seahawks 2 years ago. But they were able to come out. It wasn't pretty, that Super Bowl 50, but they got the job done when it mattered the most. And it wasn't just a Manning team. It was Von Miller who was the MVP. How often do you see a defensive player named Super Bowl MVP?
Well, it certainly was not just Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning held that team back, if anything. And for me, that's why I don't consider them the best team. They were a team that won in spite of their quarterback, which to me says they weren't necessarily complete. They had an outstanding defense, and I certainly give them all the credit for going out and winning the Super Bowl. But you look at the other nominees, for me the best team's got to be Alabama. What they do year in and year out. From the year before, 2014, they lost Amari Cooper, they lost TJ Yeldon, they lost Landon Collins. Those are three key guys moving on to the NFL. But what does Nick Saban do? He reloads every single year. He brought in the number 2 recruiting class. And what he does is he creates a culture of winning, similar to his good friend Bill Belichick, I might add. But he creates that culture of winning, and that permeates throughout the entire team. And that's why every single year you see Alabama at the top of the list, and they ran through the schedule last year. Their only loss was to Ole Miss, a real close game to one of the top teams in the country. And they play in the toughest conference, and they go out and they win the national championship over Clemson. Derrick Henry, one of the best college football players we've ever seen, especially in recent memory, over 2,000 yards, 28 touchdowns on the ground. I mean, this guy was just an absolute workhorse.
Yep.
And top to bottom, they're just a complete dominant team throughout the year.
I've said it several times, if they gave the ball to Henry more often in that 2015 Sugar Bowl against Ohio State, I think Alabama wins hands down. It was them wanting to distribute the ball to Yeldon, to Cooper, let Blake Sims make the plays, because that was what had worked so well for the Crimson Tide of the regular season. But Ohio State was able to figure out that puzzle very quickly, and it could have been a Buckeye blowout had it not been for those Ohio State turnovers in the first half.
Do you think Tom was going to let you get away with saying the Broncos was the best team without a Patriots reference?
Well, I got to say, the Broncos did beat the Patriots in the AFC Championship game. Of course, former Michigan quarterback Tom Brady throwing an interception to former Ohio State defensive back Bradley Roby on that would-be game-tying two-point conversion.
Yeah, anytime you win a championship, there's got to be luck involved. And when every single player of the Patriots offensive line is suffering injuries and banged up, it's tough to protect Tom Brady, and that was certainly a huge advantage for the Broncos in that game.
I think it's what you said at the beginning about the Broncos, saying that Peyton Manning held them back. Watching Peyton go through his college career at Tennessee and then with the Colts and the success he had with the Broncos, did you ever think you'd say that Peyton Manning would hold the team back?
Never. You never expected this. But, what happened, going all the way back to 2011 when he missed that season, he had to get all those neck surgeries. He's got this nerve damage in his neck, and that extended all the way across his shoulder and his arm to the point where you saw it that last year. He just couldn't throw a football anymore. He wasn't Peyton Manning anymore. But what he still brought to the table was an intelligence like we've never seen in a quarterback out there. He knows how to run protection schemes and how to manage an offense, but from a physical standpoint, he just could not do it anymore. And that's why at one point in the season they had to go to Brock Osweiler, and then they had to go back to Peyton Manning when that wasn't working out. So they were really, at the quarterback position, they were just trying to get something that would work all year long. Meanwhile, their defense is carrying them the entire way.
I'm just curious, do we remember who that quarterback for the Colts was in 2011? Because this was the year
Curtis
before
Painter.
they drafted Andrew
Curtis
Luck. I was
Painter,
thinking Curtis Painter, too.
Yeah, that's never a good thing when Curtis Painter. Although it got them Andrew Luck, so it all worked out.
It did.
There you go. Well, last night the ESPYs too, we saw best upset was a category. Holly Holm over Ronda Rousey. Was that the best upset you saw all year, Tom?
That's my best upset. I picked that one. I'm glad that it won because Ronda Rousey was someone who she became the biggest name in MMA for a little while, bigger than even a Conor McGregor. Although Conor's probably bigger now, but at that point, there was no male MMA guy that was bigger than her in terms of stature. She's doing movies. She's doing all these commercials, endorsement deals. She was huge, and a lot of that was because she was undefeated, and she had this aggressive personality of, just personifying toughness and just never wanting to be beat. And she looked so undefeatable.
Yep.
And then she steps in against Holly Holm, who's kind of like this sweet, she describes herself as the preacher's daughter, and she was also undefeated. Don't get me wrong, good fighter, but as far as casual fighting fans, no one really knew who she was. Never really heard of Holly Holm before. It's everyone's thinking, oh, Ronda's going to knock her out. This is going to be easy. And then when the fight actually starts, Ronda played right into her strength. She does what she does. She comes out aggressive like a bulldog, going right after, being super, super aggressive. And that plays right into the strengths of Holly Holm. She was able to just kind of sit back, defend her attacks, and pick her spots. And then you saw that head kick. I mean, that was a vicious, vicious kick, and that put her out. And Ronda hasn't fought since. It's been at least 6 months, and she's still, I mean, she talked about quitting the sport for a while. That changed her in a major, major way.
Mentally, just mental focus really kind of knocked her off track.
Change.
Well, guys, you're listening to The Change Up on WOAY Sports. Make sure you check us out on Facebook and Twitter at Sports WOAY. Again, you're listening to The Change Up with Tom Beal and Matt Digby and myself, David Miller. We'll be right back after this with WVU's Dell Wolfley.
I'm Jimbo Fisher, and you're listening to The Change Up on WOAY.
I'm Rick Trickett, and you're listening to The Change Up on WOAY.
And welcome back to The Change Up on WOAY Sports. We're joined now by Dell Wolfley. Dell is the director of the WVU Varsity Club. Dell also does WVU pregame for IMG, a halftime show, postgame show, also the Dana Holgerson show. Dell, you're a busy man with the Mountaineer team there.
Yeah, sure, it sounds like a lot, but it really isn't that much.
Well, Dell, just thanks for joining us. First of all, our opening podcast here, you know, the big news this year coming into the Mountaineer football season, I guess it would have to be the young defense. What do you expect out of this defense? Can they keep up with the offense?
Well, I would say as far as young as an experience, for sure. But there are some older guys that have been backups to some pretty good players that graduated this past season. I mean, they have big shoes to fill for sure, but they are athletic. Now, I would say right now the offense is ahead of the defense, but I expect the defense to cover a lot of ground coming up through the season.
All right, so Dale, you've been seeing these guys every day throughout the spring, you know, off-season workouts and whatnot. Who's kind of emerged for you on the defensive side of the ball, especially in that secondary? They lost, 3 guys to the NFL, combined 13 interceptions off that starting defense. So who's kind of emerging for you so far from what you've seen?
Well, actually, they lost 4 guys off because Terrell Chestnut is getting a free agency shot with the San Diego Chargers. And between Darryl Worley and Terrell, they had 9 picks and 23 pass breakups last year. So the corner position, for sure, is a big question. Now, if you want to look at this secondary and break it down, let's look at who we have in scholarships for the corners and the safeties. In the cornerback position, we have 11 scholarship players coming in this year. Now, you don't have a ton of proven experience with that, but we do have athletes. And with the safety position, you have 10 scholarship athletes. So let's go look at the outside guys first, the cornerbacks. Coming out of the spring, I would say that Nana Kyram, he's a 5'11 redshirt senior. He's played in all 13 games last season, mostly on special teams, but he did get some reps. He did start 1 game last year against TCU. So he does have that experience. He had a pretty good spring coming off. He's a smart, heady player. He knows the receivers, and he gets by a lot with his experience and being that 5th-year guy. Again, on the other side, I'd have to go look at Razul Douglas. Now, this is his 2nd year. He came late last year, and Razul had a late start, but he came on towards the end of the season, had a good spring. He's a 6'2", 208-pound cornerback. He is strong, he is big, and he also is very athletic as well for that. Now, let's go back over to the other side. Let's look at Antonio Crawford, transfer out of Miami. He played in 38 career games for Miami as the nickelback. So he does have the experience, and in 2014, before his transfer, he played in all 13 games with the Miami Hurricanes. So he had a really good spring. I like this kid. He flips his hips. What do I mean by flipping his hips? Well, when the receiver breaks and does mesh with you, even with the DB, you have to turn your hips and react. And that's what he's got with his feet. And I thought he did a really nice job. He went up against Sheldon Gibson a lot. The other quarterback, I'd say, would be Jordan Adams out of Reisterstown, Maryland. Him and his brother Jaquez are both young guys, redshirt freshmen coming in, very athletic, great leaders. I really like what they're showing right there. So out of the 11, there's your first 5 with the experience. Now, what do you have coming in is the important thing. You look at the cornerback out of Dodge City Community College. Elijah Battle. He's 6'1", 185 pounds. He's going to be a field corner. He can play. I think so. But again, you're opening up Pandora's box right now, so you're not so sure what you're going to get with these guys who haven't played here before. But then you go to the other side. You got Mike Daniels, who's coming out of Globe Tech Community College. He's a second-team All-American, NJCAA. So you hope. He's a big guy, too. He's like 210 pounds at 5'11", so he's going to be that boundary corner where he's going to play physical and rough, okay? And then we keep going down the list. When you have freshman corners such as Sean Mahone and Jake Long, who are two incoming freshmen. They're both out of Ohio. It's nice to see that we're getting some Ohio recruits again. And then, of course, you have fifth-year transfer Maurice Fleming out of Iowa, which is Big Ten is not really Big 12 kind of football, but you love to see another fifth-year guy coming in for more experience. But here's the deal. When you have the two corners, Blue Adams, who just came on this spring, I really think is an excellent coach. I watch him, and I'm telling you, he's a former player that knows the technique, but that doesn't always make you a great coach. What's impressive about Blue Adams is that I see him taking his knowledge and his technique and being able to communicate that with his DBs. So all these new guys coming in, I kind of like the fact that Blue Adams is new as well. So that's your cornerback situation. And here's the problem. You got 2.5 weeks to find out who your 4 or 5 best cornerbacks. And then they're going to have to, the rest of the camp, they're going to have to get the reps to make sure they're ready for the Missouri game.
With that said, Dale, what kind of defense do you expect them to run? You think they'll put these guys man-to-man or just kind of put them out on the island, or maybe it'll progress as the season goes along?
Well, I know that defensive coordinator Tony Gibson is absolutely going to go with what his talent allows him to do. But we all know that Coach Gibson does what? He likes to go and blitz. So what does that mean? It means that, well, we better have a pass rush, and those guys are going to be on an island. Now, let's go back to what made K.J. Dillon and Carl Joseph so successful to the NFL. And I'm going to tell you what my belief is that he made those guys go man. So K.J. Dillon and Carl Joseph actually had to cover those inside slot guys who are the quick guys, but they also have to be able to play up on the line as a safety. So that's what makes this defense so doggone hard to figure out. Are they coming? Are they going man? Or are they playing zone? So I think you're going to find a lot, again, what do we have in talent-wise? What can we do? I mean, we're obviously, if we don't have guys that can go man, we're not going to sit there and blitz all the time and put them on an island. We're going to have to cover them up. So, again, it goes back to what we have here, but we have 11 corners that can play, and then we've got to start talking about those safeties.
So definitely a lot of excitement in terms of the defense. Also a lot of excitement on the offense, particularly the offensive line. Notably, Tyler Orlowski's been getting a lot of preseason plays. He's on several watch lists. He's one of the finalists or on the watch list at least for the Remington Trophy, the Outland Trophy. He was also named All Preseason Big 12 on Wednesday, but he's not the only returning veteran on that offensive line. There are a lot of key contributors for the Mountaineers this year.
Well, hey, this is an exciting position as a group for West Virginia Mountaineers. There's no doubt about it. Let's just take a look here. Let's go to the right tackle, and we'll start and go right to left. Marcel Lazard, big 320-pounder. I'm telling you, this kid is big. He's good. He's come a long way since he started about a quarter of the way through the season last year, and he's really, really worked hard and done it. Now, you also got Colton McKivitz, who's pushing him. It's going to be a battle in camp right now. He's a redshirt freshman. He's big, 6'7", really long and lanky. I like this kid. He's got great feet. He's got great bend. What do I mean by great bend? He bends his knees, and he moves well, and he's got a great kick for the pass. Now, we move down to the right guard. You have Kyle Bosch in there, the transfer from Michigan, who played all the 13 games and started all 13 games last season. I really like him. He's kind of a wild man to me. He loves to play. He's physical. He's not all there. I'm just going to say that. And I kind of like the way he plays with all that. And then you get the T.O. at the center. Obviously, the preseason accolades are already building up for him. Deservedly so. I think USA Today put him as the best center in the country. Now, I'm not going to say who is the best, but I will tell you this. He is right there, and that's legit. And I'm really excited he's the leader of that offensive line. And then you're going to move over to Adam Pankey, the redshirt senior. Adam is big, tough, physical, really came on strong. He started out a left tackle a year and a half ago and really needed to move inside. He is a grader. He's a people mover. That's what he does, and he's big and he's strong. Really like him. And then we go to the left tackle, Yannick Adjust. was hurt a little bit for the last season, but he started a true redshirt freshman. I can't say enough about his physical ability. He has a lot of potential. We all know what potential means. If you don't reach it, it means nothing. But he has that ability. He has what it takes for him to get better and become an elite offensive lineman potentially. And then let's just go down with the rest of the offensive line. We have another 15, 16 players that we have there. We have not had this type of depth on the offensive line in years.
Yeah, so looking ahead, though, last season they finished on a high note with the bowl win over Arizona State, but overall 8-5, and there were some tough losses in the middle of the season to ranked teams, Baylor, TCU. Is there any pressure on Coach Horgerson this year to kind of step up and get over the hump against some of these top-notch teams in the Big 12?
Well, here's the first key, is that these are top-notch teams. The Big 12 is a wide-open, crazy type atmosphere. I love it. I personally love it. I love everything about it. But to get right directly to your question with Coach Hogerson, I think there's pressure on the head coach every single year to perform and be evaluated. And he knows that just as well as anybody else. That's why they make the big dollars. That's why their head guy. That's why the record actually counts against the head coach and not the assistants. It's all about them. So, yeah, obviously, he knows he has to perform each and every year.
But at the same time, though, a lot of those games that they lost last year, Oklahoma, Baylor, TCU, they were all on the road. This year, all those teams come to Morgantown. How big is that in terms of fan excitement, in terms of getting the team already pumped up, because it was already going to be a big game in their minds, but having that on your own turf at Milan Puskar Stadium, how much is that going to be an impact?
Hey, let me tell you something. I played back from 87 through 90, coached here on staff here through the years. There's nothing for a Mountaineer to play at Milan Puskar Stadium. I'm telling you right now, it's a special experience each and every time you go out on that field. So there's going to be tremendous excitement. I believe the crowds are going to be great. I mean, it's a good home schedule. When you got the likes of them coming in with Baylor, TCU, Oklahoma rolling into your stadium, you're going to get some definitely big crowds. And you know what? We need Mountaineer Nation to be there and join us, because it takes a lot to win those games. No matter how good it is at home, it's going to be tough all the way.
So, Dale, this year they're fortunate to have a lot of home games, but in a typical year they might have a lot more of these road games out in Oklahoma and down in Texas and whatnot. That can be tough for a lot of the fans around here to get out to those games. Would it be advantageous for West Virginia to consider moving to a conference that's more geographically beneficial to them and having their fans be able to travel?
Would it be more beneficial for the fans too? Sure, I would think that would be the way it is. But we're not going to leave any Power 5 conference for a non-Power 5 conference. So if there's any other conferences that are inviting us, I'd like to know about, because I haven't heard about that. But I'm going to tell you this is why I personally love the Big 12. When I go out and I visit every single school, gone out there the night before, the atmosphere, we always get our steak dinners with the IMG team, and I see the college atmosphere. Each and every college is passionate about their football and their major sports, really basketball. Okay, it's a tremendous league. You go to Oklahoma State, Stillwater, man, they love those Cowboys. They're number one right around there. You go out to Oklahoma, out in Norman, they love those Sooners. You know, obviously you go to Austin, Texas, 99,000 people at Austin. I mean, it is a great atmosphere wherever you go. Even Iowa State will sit there and fill up their stadium, who has not actually been as successful in the past few years as some of the other schools. It is a great conference to be in. I'll tell you this, if you can make a trip, maybe if you can make 1 or 2 a year, absolutely try to make it and visit the schools, because you will have a great time. They're welcoming to visiting fans. I haven't met any bad fans yet at any of the schools, so I highly recommend it, and I'm really happy that we're in the Big 12.
Hey, Dale, on fourth down, they were 9 for 19 last year, and that's really when a lot of the rumblings and the boos came in, not making those fourth down conversions. We took some chances, it seemed like, more later on in the season. A lot of times you saw the conventional run on fourth down. Do you think that's going to be a problem area again this year?
Well, actually, I don't, because I think, once again, we're better off as an offensive unit altogether. Let's take a look at the offense here. Skylar Howard obviously had a great game in the Cactus Bowl. And then he went on through the spring and had a great spring where he took over the leadership. And when you look at those receiving core, how they grew, because it wasn't just Skylar Howard. It was maybe the offensive line not blocking, maybe the backs not blocking, or the receivers not in the timing of the routes, because they're all young, and we're all working together. I saw a lot of that come together this year. So, and I see a powerful run game coming up. Hey, again, I'm going to put it on the offensive line. Do you want a yard? Go get a yard, right? I mean, that's what we want from them. So tell that offensive line to get down and dirty and dig it. And those running backs will run low, put your shoulder pads down, and get that yard. And so I'm going to put it on the whole offense, not on any particular group or unit. But now when I see them come together, I'm expecting better things this season.
Hey, Dell, who would you compare Skylar to? Is he more like a Drew Brees type quarterback in comparison to an NFL type?
Well, you're asking an offensive lineman to compare quarterbacks in the NFL. Well, that might be tough. I'll tell you what I see him is very, very heady. Okay, he is a heady guy. When Dana Holgerson tells you that Skylar Howard's making changes up on the line of scrimmage, now think about this. Look at the whole system of Dana Holgerson. We don't huddle every time. WVU doesn't huddle. Okay, so he's getting the signals in, and he has to translate that in about 20 seconds to get the play off. So he's translating the signals, then he's looking at the defense, and he's making his checks. Now, overall, offensively, we were 24th in the nation last year. So that's telling me that maybe Skylar didn't throw the most yards, but he ran the offense efficiently as best he could, and he's only going to get better, and the offense is only going to be better. I'm excited, guys. I really am.
Do you project him as a pro for next season?
Oh, I'm not going to go into that. I have no idea what he can do. I project this. I project Skylar Howard to be one of the leaders of that offense and take that offense and lead like he's done since this winter, this spring, and now this summer. And I think he'll continue on through camp in that manner. And you know what? I wish him the best. He would not be the first quarterback that was 6'2" or less to be in the NFL. So, you know what? Who knows? He's got a strong arm now. He's got a cannon.
Yeah, how much of that confidence do you think goes back to, I remember when Coach Holgerson brought the team to the Greenbrier in the spring of 2015 for a practice, and one of the things he said was Skylar's the guy. There wasn't that much debate over the quarterback position. He was basically implying that it was Skylar's to lose, and as it turned out, that was the case throughout the 2015 season. How has that helped his confidence, in your opinion?
Well, I know what it did for me when I was named the starter, and that, you know, I had that edge. Now, I had a battle every single day, and competition made me better. And Skylar's got to do the same thing. I mean, Chugginoff is a good quarterback, a young good quarterback, and he's going to put pressure on Skylar. But there's no doubt in my mind coming out of the spring that Skylar Howard solidified his position as a starting quarterback of the West Virginia University Mountaineers.
And then also going back one more to the opponents you got, you have Iowa State, which again you mentioned earlier. They are one of the several teams West Virginia is playing that's going to have new coach. They hired Matt Campbell away from Toledo, and then also opening the season against Missouri, they have a new coach in Barry Odom. How's that going to be, you think, that new experience, necessarily, especially for Missouri, because they don't usually play the Tigers often?
Well, I'll tell you what, that Tiger defense, I've just been doing some preliminary work on them, and boy, they got some strong numbers from last season, the same defensive coordinator as is the head coach. Now, what they're lacking is having the offensive coordinator is different. So that offense is going to be, which was very poor in the whole nation last year, I think you're going to see great improvement from them. So I think it's going to be a battle. It's going to be tough. What a great first test. I mean, anytime you have a brand new head coach, you're going to have a few issues working on the first few games of the season. There's just no doubt. It's your first time you're managing as a head coach. Your players are learning how you want to manage the team. And so I think there's a lot to be said for that. Remember, BYU has a brand new head coach. Okay, so we have a couple more, and I think we need to use that to our advantage for sure. But, hey, man, it's Division I, Power 5 conference football. It's going to be a battle.
Dale, just wrapping it up, just give us some insight on the Big 12 in general. What do you expect the outcomes to be this year? Do you see Texas making that next step, or do you see Oklahoma continuing their run, or TCU, or especially Baylor?
You know what? It's funny because it's not really funny, but it kind of is. And when you keep looking at these teams, they just keep reloading. Now, let's look at the offensive lines for TCU, Texas Tech, and Baylor. They graduated 4 of their starting offensive linemen. They were all redshirt seniors. Okay, so that's going to be a battle for those teams to come in and fill that offensive line because, as an offensive line, you have to work as one. 5 guys working as one. And when you have 4 that are graduated, have been playing together for a few years, I expect to be a few issues. But when we play Baylor the last game of the season, probably that will be worked out. But I would say this, Oklahoma State looks strong. Oklahoma looks strong. Texas keeps building up. I'm a big fan of Coach Charlie out there, strong. I mean, I think he's a really heady coach that's solid fundamental football. Now, I do think that they need a quarterback that's going to step up and execute that offense. But, yeah, I think Texas is going to be pretty tough this year. There's no doubt about it. And I am happy that we are going to have Oklahoma here at WVU because Baker Mayfield is one terrific stud. When I went out in the field last year at Oklahoma, I stood next to him about 10 feet away, and I said, I could not believe how big he actually was. I never thought he would be that size and that thick. And, of course, we all know what a terrific quarterback and football player he is.
What do you see for the big future for the Big 12? You see them adding another team, and maybe there's been rumblings about BYU in the past, or maybe another team. What do you see?
Well, I'll tell you what I see. I see a championship game coming up in 2017. That's the first thing I see. I don't think that they will expand beforehand. This is just me going on me. I don't know very much about this. I think eventually they will probably expand. That's just the gut feeling that I have. I have nothing to back that up other than what I hear from the top of the league.
And do you think it's also going to be by geography? Because we've seen conferences just pick division names. I remember the Big Ten got a lot of grief for naming their divisions legends and leaders, and ACC, they going by Atlantic and Coastal, that has actually worked out quite well for them. But how important is it going to be in the fans' perspective to make those divisions based on geography rather than just picking 5 teams at random?
I'm going to leave that up to the head officials of the Big 12, but I would think there'd be a few more geographical teams that would be closer east of the Mississippi, and that's just a guess of mine. But I think you'll see that cover more ground in the United States and get more exposure.
All right, just finally, Dale, if you could, just tell us one player maybe that we're missing out there and the fans are missing that you really maybe seen in practice or in the spring game that you think is going to step up that nobody's talking about right now.
Well, I think there's actually a couple of them, but I will say this. I think Rasheed Benton is absolutely going to be a terrific middle linebacker for us. I like our linebacking core. I think we're very athletic there. Xavier Preston at Sam, again, is, I think, a really tough physical player. I really like them. I mean, you know who I really love? I just love this young man, Darian Howard, the nose guard. He is just tough as nails. He's going to sit there and take on 2 to 3 blockers every single play, and he doesn't complain. He gets there. If you can remember in a game last year at Baylor, there was a big breakaway. Seth Russell, I believe, ran for a touchdown, and there was one guy that was chasing him. Probably didn't have any hopes in the world of catching him because it was Darian Howard. It was amazing. He ran him down, and that showed me everything I needed to know about Darian Howard in that one play. He's got character, toughness, and he's not going to give up.
Awesome, Dale. Fantastic stuff. We appreciate you taking a few minutes to come on with us and get everyone previewed for the season. It should be a good one.
Well, I sure hope so, guys. Love talking to Southern West Virginia right here. And let's go Mountaineers and have a great 2016 campaign.
Absolutely. Take care, Dale.
Take care. Thank you.
All right, that was Dale Wolfley, the WVU director of the Varsity Club, also the host of the pregame, halftime, postgame for IMG on the Mountaineer Radio Networks. Also does the Dana Holgerson. Guys, I mean, we heard
There's
a
lot
lot
of stuff.
Yeah, we heard a lot there. I mean, he's excited about the defense, but, the one thing that kind of stood out to me was the 11 corners ready to play.
That's a lot of guys. I mean, you're talking about 11 scholarship cornerbacks and 10 safety scholarship players. They got to whittle that down to a starting unit. So there's going to be a lot of work for the coaching staff to figure out in these next couple of weeks, where they're going to be as a team and who's really going to step up and take charge.
Yeah, and the one thing you mentioned was that a lot of guys do have experience. Maybe not necessarily starters experience like what we had with Carl Joseph, KJ Dillon, and Terrell Chestnut, but also one guy, I don't know if we mentioned, Trayvon Askew-Henry. He's back. He got a lot of quality minutes in that defense, so he's going to be looked upon as the leader, I think, for not just the secondary, but I would also argue for the entire defense, him and Noble Wachuku.
Tom, I think you brought up that October, man. It was just brutal. You had Oklahoma number 15, and this is their final rankings. I believe at the time, Oklahoma's, do you remember, Matt? They were a top 5 team at the time, I think, when we played them.
I think so, and WVU, I know, had just entered the top 25 because they were coming off their win over Maryland to get to 3-0, and there were a lot of positive vibes going into that game at Norman.
Yeah, and that's really what defines a team. I mean, anyone can beat some of these, lesser teams in their conference, some of these outer conference games that they have, especially at the beginning of the season, to kind of get the guys warmed up. But it's really what you do against those top 25 teams that defines how good your program is. And that's where they really struggled last year with a secondary as good as it was, and now they lose those players to the NFL. They got to try to reload with some guys who are less experienced, and they play in that tough Big 12 conference. So it's going to be a major, major challenge.
And I think also part of it's the strength of the out-of-conference schedule. No disrespect to Georgia Southern, but they're not the strongest FBS team. Liberty is FCS. Maryland, we all know, a lot of us know the struggles that the Terrapins went through firing their head coach in the middle of the season. I think this year's out-of-conference schedule is going to be much stronger because you have a Missouri team that was only a couple of years in the SEC, but they've already surpassed a lot of expectations. They're going to want to continue that under Barry Odom. BYU, they're looking towards a lot of optimism, even without Bronco Mendenhall because he's at Virginia. But Youngstown State also, their third non-conference opponent, they actually play week 2. They got Bo Pelini coming to Morgantown. That's always going to be fun.
It's a great team.
Bo Pelini is always a character.
Still yet, I hear Dale, the excitement about the younger defense. He's hyping up the corners there, but I mean, look at last year's number. The Mountaineer defense ranked number 13 nationally in third down defense. Nationally ranked in pretty much everything. Interceptions, they had 23. Number 2 nationally in passes intercepted.
They're losing a lot of picks off that defense.
Number 5 in turnovers, 31 turnovers. Number 15 in turnover margin, and tied for number 8 in defensive 3 and outs. That's a lot of heady numbers.
And especially, you talk about turnovers, that's something that affects the whole team because that affects, the offense's ability to get back on the field and really control time of possession. Especially a team that likes to, run the football. They're going to have a revamped offensive line, and so that's going to make a major impact across the board.
Matt, when I hear they talk about Skylar Howard and some of the criticism, when you hear heady quarterback, you hear tough, gritty, but you don't hear elite. Is Skylar Howard elite?
I wouldn't call him elite right now, but I think he definitely has the opportunity this year to become elite. The fact that he is a second-year returning full-time starter, because remember he did fill in for Clint Trickett at the very end of 2014, so he does have that opportunity. But the thing is, can he maintain that momentum that he had that served him so well in the Cactus Bowl, served him so well through a lot of the regular season, notwithstanding the losses, and so well throughout the spring, because he did very well throughout the spring. And like we were saying, it's definitely his job to lose, just like it was last year. So if he can keep that momentum, he definitely has the potential to become elite.
Yeah, and I talked to him a couple weeks ago at Media Day, and I mean, he really seems like he's ready for the challenge of stepping up and once again being a leader to what's going to be a little bit of a younger team. And so I think he's prepared to do what he has to do to make that jump to the next level, whether that's throwing more or just being a smarter overall player and managing the offense. But I mean, he's shown he has the skill set. He has a strong arm. It's just a matter of can he make those reads and stay away from the turnovers.
I think a big thing, maybe just looking back, is he's got to stay injury-free. He does a lot of things, and when he goes out of the pocket, he's not the biggest guy. He is tough, stocky guy, but he's going to take a pounding this year.
Yeah, I mean, as far as quarterbacks go, he's not the biggest guy in the world. He's strong, maybe compared to your average size person. He's a lot bigger and stronger. But there's some big linemen coming at you each and every play, and they're coming fast. So it's going to be a challenge. But they do seem to have a pretty good offensive line. They seem to be in pretty decent shape as far as that goes. So hopefully that will help him. Yeah,
like we were mentioning, a lot of returning veterans on the offensive line, especially Tyler Orlowski. Like I was saying, he's getting all the preseason praise right now. Preseason All Big 12 on the watch list for the Remington and Outland trophies. So that's going to be a key offensive line, not just for Howard, but also for the running backs, led by Russell Shell.
Matt, we're talking a lot of defense here because it's kind of the unknown going into the season, but we kind of take it for granted that this offense will keep up this pace and maybe even take that extra step. Are we giving them too much credit?
I don't know for sure, because they were able to, what I saw in the spring game, for example, they made a couple mistakes early, but then they rebounded and got back on track. Some of the guys that little bit lower on the depth chart, they were able to make plays and lead the offense to a win. I mean, take nothing away from the defense. They did, after all, go 11 straight quarters at one point late in the season without giving up a touchdown, from the third quarter of the Texas game to the third quarter of the Iowa State game. So that's going to be interesting thing to watch, how the offense grows this year.
Yeah, and I think when you return a lot of guys on offense, they're naturally going to get better and make a jump, with that extra experience. I mean, the one concern as far as them making that jump would be if the defense can keep up, because if the offense can't get on the field and control the ball, then it's going to be tough for them to make the jump to the next level.
So with all that said, what's your prediction, Matt? Another 8-5 season, maybe take a jump into Big 12, or?
I think I'm not going to go on the record right now yet as far as a record, but I definitely think we'll finish higher in the Big 12 than they did last year. Definitely look at, no disrespect to the Cactus Bowl, but maybe one a bowl with terms of higher prestige in a way.
Yeah, I think Coach Holgorsen, he knows the pressure's on. He knows he's got to make this thing work, especially on the defense. So it really depends on who steps up and who wins the job. And who knows, maybe some guy will come out and emerge in that secondary and really show us something that we weren't expecting. And that defense will be a lot better than people think it's going to be. And they'll be, right back at 8-5 or hopefully better for Coach Holgorsen.
How big is that Missouri game, Matt? I mean, just coming right into the season, you got an SEC opponent. That's really a make or break for the season, don't you think? If they get stopped in that game, that could really break them down.
It really does, and it brings into question, the possibility of Youngstown State maybe pulling an upset, because Youngstown State is not a pushover program, neither is BYU, and then when you get into the gauntlet of the Big 12, I mean, the Missouri game is going to be huge. They're going to be playing with the chip on their shoulder because of all the recent incidents they've had at their campus and with their school. They have a new coach coming in wanting to prove himself, a former player in Barry Odom. So that's going to be very exciting. A noon kickoff. So a lot of us here in Southern West Virginia will have to get up at the crack of dawn, but I think it will be worth it to see the great game.
Yeah, if, like you said, if they lose that game, it puts them in a real tough spot with those games coming up. On the other hand, though, if they win that game, open the season against a tough SEC opponent, and they win that game, that gives them a lot of confidence and a lot of positive momentum that they can really carry through the next few games, and then once they get into their conference schedule, they'll be rolling.
I think the confidence is going to be key with these younger guys, as we keep talking about on the different defensive side.
You got to get those early wins, and that builds.
So do you expect them to blitz a lot?
I think they're probably going to have to at some point. You might have to take some chances if you don't have guys that are necessarily proven as far as cover guys and playing in a scheme. Sometimes you got to be a little more risky and gamble a little bit.
What do you expect, Allen or man-to-man?
I'm thinking man-to-man, because I saw a lot of man-to-man, especially the season finale, which I was able to attend against Iowa State, and it worked very well. They were able to shut down Iowa State's offense. Granted, the Cyclones have been struggling all 2015, so it wasn't like it was the most daunting task in the world for the Mountaineer defense, but they worked very well, I thought, as a man-to-man defense.
As much as we talked about last year's defense, the thing that sticks out to me is they still gave up 62 against Baylor, 44 against Oklahoma, 33 Oklahoma State. You could keep going down the list. 42 against Arizona State. They won by 1. Is that just Big 12 ball? Is it just too many points?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, it's such a good conference that you're going to have those games. And so that's, once again, we keep going back to this defense. But it depends on how well can they step up. How much have these other teams been able to reload to maintain that level of offense that they were at last year? But the Big 12, it's always going to be tough. So, I mean, there will most definitely be a couple games like that on the schedule where it just happens. The other team puts up a lot of points.
What do you see out of the Big 12 this year? More high scoring?
I definitely see more high scoring. I certainly believe whoever wins is going to be a lock for the college football playoff. But I'm not sure if I'm ready to go ahead and crown Oklahoma as the king of the Big 12 like a lot of other critics are. I mean, yes, Oklahoma is definitely one of the favorites. I definitely am not arguing that. Baker Mayfield certainly a front runner as of right now for the Heisman Trophy at least. But there are always surprises in every conference in the country. Baylor could do well, TCU could do well, especially Baylor since they have Seth Russell and Jarrett Stidham both coming back.
So we're about 50 days out?
51 days.
51 days. You're
51
excited?
days.
I'm about ready for football, man. It's that time of year. We got to
way
get some
too
football
long.
going.
Yep. All right, guys, you're listening to The Change Up on WOAY Sports. You can check us out on Twitter and Facebook at Sports WOAY. We'll also have a YouTube channel up and running. Make sure you listen to our podcast here and share it and get it along to your friends. And Welcome back into the Change-Up on WOAY Sports. I'm here with Tom Beal and Mac Digby, our sports team here at WOAY. Guys, we talked to Dale Wolfley earlier, a great conversation about WVU sports. We also hit up the ESPYs. Just taking away, we're in the dog days of summer, boys. It's a little light.
Yeah, a little bit light. I mean, definitely you do have British Open this week, so golf fans are going to be very excited about the third major of the year over at Royal Troon in Scotland. I don't know if they're excited about waking up early because the rounds start at 1:30 a.m. here in the East Coast.
No, I'm not waking up early.
This guy, I mean,
It's one of those, it's better to almost stay up in a way and then wake up because it will still be going on at 8 a.m. when you wake up here, but it's not too bad. And, the Bluefield Blue Jays and Princeton Rays are resuming their season, still young in the season, chance for them to make some runs and for the Rays get back to the Appalachian League Championship Series after finishing runner-up last year.
And Matt was cracking me up last night. We were here till 2 o'clock in the morning. Had to be back here at 9. Matt told me, he said, I'm not going to bed until I see the first tee on the British Open, the first tee off.
Man, I think you just pick sports that, the most obscure time possible. That's your thing right there.
Hey, I mean, if it was at 6:30 here in the East, well, chances are I'd probably be there too. I mean, with the Greenbrier Classic, I probably would have been there for the ceremonial first tee shot of the week. Had the Greenbrier been originally played as it was scheduled on July 7th through the 10th, but it was canceled, and they're now looking forward to hoping they could get the old white TPC back in shape for next year's tournament.
Yeah, and unfortunately, without the Greenbrier Classic, for those of us who are more into traditional sports, this is kind of that period of the year where it's really just baseball carrying the torch until we can get football season coming, and just a few more weeks, and then we get the New Orleans Saints coming in here. So luckily, the flooding did not ruin that experience. They're still going to be coming into the Greenbrier, and that's something big for everyone to look forward to in this area.
Yeah, they've always been very complimentary of the Greenbrier, and I know, speaking with Cam Huffman from the Greenbrier Resort, the conversations he's had with the Saints people, they know what it's like to go through a natural disaster, having been through Katrina 11 years ago. They're aware of some of the better ways to cope with the disaster elements, and they'll be bringing plenty of supplies, and just a lot of positive attention, I think, is also what they need. A lot of attention is on focusing and helping the victims, but I also think positive, because there is that rebuilding process. You're fixing something.
So going back to the dog days of summer, it really kind of we kind of joke about it, but is baseball really America's sport anymore?
Well, I think, a lot of people like to call it the national pastime. That's kind of just a moniker that was slapped on, way back in the 1950s or whatever, and it kind of stuck because, it sounds nice and all that, but everyone knows football's been king for, 30 years now. I mean, football is the number one sport in this country. It dominates the landscape. Baseball, it's on the decline in a sense. Baseball is never going to die out and go away, because just look at the TV money, that's still increasing every single year. The regional TV contracts get larger and larger and larger every year, and the player salaries are still going up. So it's still a healthy league, it's still a viable league. But as far as being the most popular, I mean, you're looking at the emergence of basketball has shot way up the ranks in the last 10 to 15 years, especially with the globalization of the game and bringing in new talent from overseas. Baseball is always going to have its spot. Soccer's kind of coming up, though, amongst the youth generation. I think there's a study a couple of years ago, kids ages 12 to 17 watch the MLS more than they watch the MLB. And the MLS is far from the top soccer league as far as the global landscape.
Right.
I mean, it's England, it's France's league, it's Spain's league. Those are the predominant leagues. And people are even here, people like Matt waking up bright and early to watch these games. And
Exactly, yeah.
it is a very good product. But baseball, it's not going anywhere. It's still here to stay.
Yeah, I think the one issue is, though, if you do have a favorite Major League Baseball team or even a favorite minor league baseball team, you'll make the effort to watch it. If you don't have a favorite team, like, for example, I just watch Major League Baseball just to watch the games, especially once the playoffs and the World Series start. But I don't have a diehard favorite team that I'm a fan of that I can't go a minute without checking their roster report, seeing who's injured or on the DL.
You're from Ohio, so you kind of fall in between the Cleveland Indians and the Reds. In your area, what's the most predominant team, or is there one?
Baseball-wise, it's kind of the Indians in a way, partially because Columbus, we have our minor league team, which is the AAA club for the Indians, so it's always great to see some of our guys make it up to Cleveland. And back in the 90s, when I was growing up, they were the farm club for the Yankees. So we were spoiled, to be honest. We had guys like Derek Jeter coming through our ranks, Mariano Rivera, Tino Martinez.
Late 90s teams.
But yeah. But I think it's all goes back to also the point, Columbus, you have Ohio State. It dominates everything. I mean, we have the Blue Jackets. They're not as big as the Buckeyes, as well as the Blue Jackets have done in recent years, as well as the Columbus Crew has done in MLS. They still have a long way to go before they match up to the Buckeyes in terms of popularity.
I know for here, being a West Virginia native, I mean, obviously there's no professional sports here, so a lot of people root for Pittsburgh or maybe Cincinnati. Even the local radio stations here will play Reds baseball, Pirates baseball. You get Root Sports and some other channels that bring us that regional coverage. But you're a Boston guy, big Red Sox. The regional coverage is really where it hits home, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and Boston is a city where the people don't follow college teams like they do down here. College teams dominate the sports landscape down in this area, and in Massachusetts and New England, it's all about the Patriots, the Red Sox, the Bruins, and the Celtics. Those are the teams that everyone cares about. To a lesser extent, some of the local college hockey. There's a lot of good college hockey teams in Boston that people follow. To a lesser extent, the Beanpot tournament is very popular, but for the most part, college sports are kind of an afterthought. BC football hasn't really been good for quite a while, since the Matt Ryan days. So it's really all about pro sports.
And West Virginia has a lot of roots with BC football. We used to play them in the Big East, and the changing landscape of the northeastern part of the country really, like you said, has become more pro-dominated, while here and the southern part is really all about college sports. You got the SEC, obviously Bama, Tennessee, all those teams. They just dominate the region.
Yeah, and it takes over the entire culture. It is kind of. And I think a lot of it's more of an urban thing, because when you have a major metropolis, you're more likely to have these big pro sports franchises.
Right.
And there's not as many big cities in this area, so you'll have cities like Charlotte or someone that have maybe one or two pro teams.
Right.
But there's not like a Boston, New York, where there's a pro team for every major professional sport.
So with that said, we talked about baseball in college. We've seen the UFC get sold this week. That's big news in an up-and-coming sport. Dana White once said that the UFC would be larger than the NFL. They're not there yet.
That's a huge deal for the UFC, because the sale went for $4 billion. That's the largest professional sports franchise sale ever. The Cowboys were just ranked at about $4 billion, so the UFC still has a long way to go. I mean, the entire sport is worth what the Cowboys are worth. But for Dana White and the Fertitta brothers, they bought the UFC back in 2000 for just $2 million. So I'd say it's a pretty good return on investment over a 16-year period. And I think they cashed out at the perfect time, because if you look at UFC 200 and kind of the way that went, where they had to bring Brock Lesnar back in from the WWE just to kind of save face on their card. They're kind of at a spot where they're hurting for star power at this moment, as good as it's been and as much as the sport is growing. So they sold it to WME-IMG, and they're kind of more business-oriented guys, whereas Dana White's more of a passionate, fight promoter type of guy who loves the sport, and that's why it's gotten to where it's gotten. But now that he's turned it over to guys who are used to running businesses and growing businesses in more of a corporate sense, they'll be able to take it to the next level and hopefully develop some stars.
Where do you see the future of the UFC?
I think it's going to be great just in terms of overall exposure, because that's one of the things that it will get is general exposure. Because if you have it on easily accessible networks, that's going to encourage people to watch. If you have it on pay-per-view all the time, not many people are going to watch it, like you see happen with a lot of the premier boxing fights, for example. So it's all about exposure for UFC.
Yeah, they've done some good stuff too, getting it on Fox Sports 1 for some of the fight night things, but still predominantly the major cards are pay-per-view, and that's a model that I think they'll examine going forward. I'm not sure if they're planning on changing that, but it's something they'll definitely look at. They're going to look at everything with this sale.
All right, guys, let's bring it home. Matt, take us home first. Your thoughts about this week and our first show here.
Absolutely. Well, the first show has been great. We're a couple days past the European Soccer Championships. That's something we've talked about a lot on WOAY News Watch, and it just finished this past weekend with Portugal beating France, the tournament host. So Portugal, they were the hosts in 2004. They lost to underdogs Greece 1-0 in 2004. Now 12 years later, Cristiano Ronaldo finally gets that major tournament that he's so desperately wanted to win with the Portuguese national team. He finally does it at the tournament against the tournament host France in the Stade de France. But one of the big things, though, that I took away is it was not that exciting a tournament when you take a look at it from it, because the big change for this tournament was they upgraded from 16 to 24 teams. That meant 4 of the third-place teams were going to make the knockout round, and Portugal happened to be one of those 4 third-place teams. But not only that, they did not win a single game in the group stage. They had a draw with Iceland, they had a draw with Austria, in which Ronaldo missed a penalty, and then they were down 3 separate times to Hungary, and they had to rally to beat Hungary. And then in the round of 16, it wasn't much better. They had to go to extra time to beat Croatia. They had to go to penalties to beat Poland in the quarterfinals. They did beat Wales in the semifinals in 90 minutes, but then they had to go to extra time again to beat France in the final. And it was unfortunate that Ronaldo was injured so early in the final, because I think that really could have made a great story. But I think UEFA may want to re-examine how they do the qualification. I'm certainly not against expanding to 24 teams, but they've got a lot to figure out in the next 4 years.
Do you think Portugal plays better as a team without Ronaldo?
I honestly don't know, because I'm so used to seeing Ronaldo in the starting lineup. He provides such an influence whether he actually scores goals or not. So it's going to be very tough to see, because this is probably the last tournament we're going to be able to see him in his peak form. He might be around in 2 years for the World Cup in Russia or wherever it's held. I mean, who knows if FIFA's going to pull the Russia World Cup, Qatar World Cups, and put them elsewhere.
That's a big question mark.
But that's probably not going to be where we see Ronaldo in his prime. This was probably the last opportunity we had. And it's unfortunate, again, that he got injured and wasn't able to play a whole lot beyond 25 minutes. But I thought this provided a good test for Portugal, to answer your question, Tom. They had to respond to that adversity playing without one of their star players, the guy who's really been the catapult for their success and their reputation throughout the past decade. And they showed that they could do just fine without him. So I think it will help them in the long run.
He certainly hoisted that trophy like he did a lot more than he did in that final game. But, for me, bringing it home, I know you guys are hurting out there. We're close. Football's right around the corner. It's something like 50 some odd
51
days until we get going here. So I know everyone's excited about it. Stick with us, guys. We're close. We're almost there.
All right, and for myself, just bringing it home, I'm excited about this podcast, this opportunity we have to voice our opinions and get your opinions there at home when you guys are watching. Make sure you comment online. We're at WOAY Sports. That's on Twitter and Facebook. As both these guys said, we're pretty ramped up for the upcoming college football season. Of course, the Mountaineers and the Marshall Thundering Herd are the 2 big teams here that we'll follow closely, and Virginia Tech, this WOAY Sports team, will bring you all the latest with these guys. We got some previews coming up this summer. Make sure you watch us online and also live. You guys are doing a lot of work with these 3 teams. Just bringing it home, I think the excitement is here. We are in the dog days, but I think we'll get past it. We still have some good baseball. There's going to be some tight races.
Yeah,
some very tight.
Hey, the Pirates, who knows? They got pretty close to the Cubs just before the All-Star break there, so they can make a run.
That's right, yeah. And again, not too long to go before football. Starting in August, we'll be running previews each day of all the different area teams as they get ready for football season. So let us know when your favorite team starts their preseason practice. We'd love to get out to as many schools as we can to do previews of all the teams in our area.
Yeah, it's a great point. We're also going to cover high school sports. We got a couple helmets and some jerseys behind us. We're very, involved in the high schools locally here, and we'll bring you all the up-to-date coverage. If you guys want to come and join us here live on set, you're more than welcome. But for Tom Beal and Matt Digby, I'm David Miller. Thank you for joining us for the change-up.
Wait, one more thing before we go. I just want to give everyone a shout-out. If you like the music that we're hearing right now on this podcast, check out my friend John Canada out of Richmond, Virginia, Gritty City Records. Go check him out on SoundCloud. He's got some good stuff out there, so go ahead and check that out. Yeah, and we want to thank Showtime Music in Beckley at the Crossroads Mall also for helping us with some equipment. I think that'll do it, guys. Did we talk enough?
I think we talked enough. And great. Yeah, it was a great first show.
Yeah,
it was
I
a
think
great
so.
first show.
I think
Looking forward to see you guys for many more.
All right, guys. Make sure you tune in for the change-up on WOAY Sports.